Welcome back to the What's True Health podcast. You're joined by myself, Victor, and Daniel Arbilla. Welcome, everyone. Today, today we're going to be talking about basically discussing and breaking down a lot of sort of common claims and sort of ideas that are sort of out there in the health world that a lot of people sort of adhere to, and sort of break them down using a sort of framework we've come up with. And yeah, welcome everyone.
Yeah, I'm excited for this because, I feel like a lot of people don't actually, they just accept things a lot of the time and accept a lot of claims, and then they don't actually spend the time to break it down like we are about to and just say, like, what do you mean by this? Do you have any evidence? Is it logical? So I think this is really good, not
Yeah,
only for us, but also for people listening to just see that there's more to, I guess, like your beliefs and claims than you might think, and is actually a really good way to reflect on your own understanding and see where you're at, your strengths and weaknesses, or where you might need some further clarification. So yeah.
yeah. And I think it'll be quite interesting because a lot of the ones we're going to sort of discuss are really sort of cemented claims in society. So, for example, we're going to discuss tightness is bad. We're going to talk about stability and how that can lead to pain,
Imbalances.
and yeah, imbalances in that sort of area, and then activation drills in preventing injury. So yeah, we're going to dive into that whole area, and yeah,
Exciting.
Daniel, is Daniel there?
Keen. Yes,
Is
I'm
that
here.
cool? Nice. All right. Well, Victor, do you want to, or Daniel, do you
Yeah.
want to talk about this sort of
Uh,
framework and how we're going to break these down?
Victor, I think you've got a bit more of a context because you had a slide or like a claim from a slide,
yeah,
and we
yeah,
wanted to start from there. So I'll be guided by you
sure.
and
All right. So yeah, so before we start, we'll sort of just we'll go back to ontology, and ontology basically means like what basically what do you mean, like defining terms and stuff like that. So I'm going to present this claim, and then we'll start from there. We'll break down the meaning of each word and then sort of build up from there, because if you don't have the same definitions, then things get out of control really quickly. So this is a real life example from our lecture, from one of our subjects, and here's how it goes. So flexibility and performance. Be aware of the optimal range of motion required of the athlete, but also concentrate on the force patterns required through this range of motion. And also higher risks of injury with both inflexibility and hyperflexibility, as well as an imbalance in flexibility. So there's a lot to unpack there, a lot of definitions. Um, yeah, so I guess where would you want to start? I think we could start off with maybe the second claim, and then we can go to the first claim. I feel like the second claim is shorter and a bit easier to unpack. So higher risks of injury with both inflexibility and hyperflexibility, as well as an imbalance in flexibility.
Yeah.
So what is injury? We can start with from there.
it's tough as there's so many different definitions for a lot of these terms, and it can be difficult to figure out where to start with injury. Essentially, if the load exceeds tissue capacity is like the most standardized definition. I don't have a reference off the top of my head, but then there's a delineation or difference between injury and pain. So
Mm.
there's still like there's ongoing debates about what is classified like the ontology or the um, definition of a injury. But if there's consensus, it's like if the load exceeds tissue's capacity and there is some form of tissue damage along with, see, some even don't even include pain. So I'm struggling even now to figure out a definition. So this is like the shaky foundations
Mm.
of what we're working with. But so with or without pain, but it prevents participation in sports or activity. So that's the biggest thing. So like you can have pain, but it doesn't influence your participation in a soccer match. So you're not technically in this definition injured, but you have pain, for instance. And then you can have tissue injury, say some kind of meniscal tear showing up in a scan, in an MRI, and you have zero pain, and you have full participation in your kind of sport, say tennis or parkour. And I'm sure each of you would probably know some athletes that have each of these.
Is it, yeah, if you have a meniscal tear without pain, is that an injury? That's tough for me
It depends
because,
on your definition.
like, I would say injury is something that like stops you from your meaningful activities. Because, like, so what if you have a bulging disc? That's like, I don't think it's injury. That's more like I don't even know what to call that. It's just like biological abnormality, but it's not even an abnormality. So, like, I don't know. I think that's personally, I would go with that definition of injury. You guys might be different, but I think the problem is that it just says injury, and you would have to talk to the person who presented the claim.
Are you, Victor, are you saying sort of with injury, as if it associates with pain, that's what sort of defines it?
I'm just saying, for me, injury is something that stops you from your meaningful activities.
Yeah, I agree
It
with
can
that.
be with or without pain. Like, for example, oh yeah, like if you want to be able to do like a handstand, but you don't have the overhead mobility, is that injury then? Because that's stopping
Well,
you.
it might not be pain, it might be inability to perform the task. Like you may have, like you might go to do a handstand and like your arm doesn't move in that way. I don't know. Like
Is that
it might
injury? Or is
be
that just
pain.
range of motion problem?
Mm,
So,
true.
yeah.
Yeah,
Very
so
true.
like briefly looking up, physiopedia is great for this. It says damage to the tissues of the body as a result of sport or exercise, but that doesn't include the other terms of pain, nor can you have damage to, like if you get a contusion, like a bruise on your leg, does that influence your participation in a soccer match?
It depends, right?
Yeah. So that's where like the function aspect is important to acknowledge. Because otherwise, like I was going through uni and I was like, this is all cool, awesome, great info. And I never questioned anything. So then I got to the end of uni and I just assumed that if you have a tissue-based pathology or a scan result, that's bad and that you should not have that.
Mm,
True.
yeah. I think, okay, do we want to just roll with the idea that injury is a biological, something wrong biologically, like a tear or something like that? Because I think that's where, uh, at least from the uni perspective, that's where they'll be coming from. So I think I
Yeah,
like,
that's the simple way. That's the simple
yeah,
way to sort of describe it. Like, because we can go for ages talking all about that. Really, like, there's a lot of
yeah,
things to cover there, but we could keep it simple in that way.
yeah, because then in that way we're steel manning, so there's no like, sort of we're not artificially manipulating the claim that suits
Yeah.
our biases, I guess. So I guess we want to represent the claim in the best way possible. So yeah, okay, that's injury. So higher risk of injury with
Do you want to wait, Victor? 1 second before we keep going. Do you want
yeah,
to? Are you able to screen share that slide? Because it's probably be good to have the visual
yeah,
while we
sure.
talk, so people can see that what the slide looks like.
Yeah, give me a second while I bring that up. But I think we should also define flexibility while I bring that up.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming in the context of the lecture, it was range of motion, active range of motion of a joint.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
active
So
range of
like muscular contraction, the ability for a muscle to contract to its full range, for instance.
Yeah.
Because then there's like passive versus active is the other.
Yeah.
okay, I got it. Let me just share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Perfect. So yeah, that was from the slide. Yeah, so flexibility, active range of motion of a joint. I feel happy with that definition. I feel like that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And then higher risk of injury with both inflexibility as well as hyperflexibility and an imbalance in flexibility. So if
There's so much in that sentence. Like it's ridiculous, right?
well, okay,
And the slide
first
is
of all, there's no like it might be a valid argument, but it's not going to be a sound argument because there's no evidence to support it, right?
Yeah.
So we can just kind of, I guess with that filter, you can kind of just move on. We don't have to dawdle on too long about it. But yeah, if it was a real life situation, I encountered this sort of information, I would probably just say whatever. There's no evidence.
Yeah,
So,
Hitchens razor is a type of like heuristic or like a shortcut that you can use when just like rejecting claims like this, because there's no evidence provided for this claim, or like very like shaky quality evidence, so you can just dismiss it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, yeah, that's actually
The,
really good.
the
What's the
burden
point?
of proof is
Yeah, what?
to whoever makes the claim, and this is not to, I'm really mindful because I just like, I have a tone of voice that's like frustrated, but I'm not attacking any person, any lecturer, any individual or organization or profession. It's just about the claim. And if you make a claim, it's like your responsibility to say where you got the claim from or what your reasoning behind the claim is. Otherwise, it's just like students doing all the work to try and like read people's minds or figure out the links.
Mm. And we actually
We,
contacted the lecturer, right, Henry?
yeah.
And
Yeah, we
then
did.
he said it was from a textbook, right? Some textbook.
Yeah, it was basically, he said that this was directly taken from, yeah, a textbook, a 2015 textbook, which was Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning, fourth edition, Human Kinetics.
Mm.
And on from that, so he referenced the full sentence. In addition, an imbalance in flexibility could predispose the individual to increased risk. Yeah. And then references, then he provided the references within the textbook. So there's a few of those references as well. And then he provided other useful references. So on this occasion, in this slide, he did not reference exactly, but basically a lot of the other things he does say, he has referenced quite well compared to some lectures I've seen. But yeah, definitely here we need, if you're providing, like for us to find, like to have to reach out and get the reference ourselves is, to me, pretty poor. Like you need to be able to provide that if you're making these really bold statements, because that's a massive statement, right?
Mm. I totally
Especially
agree.
when it's a topic like this that's so complex and like
Yeah.
being argued as of right now with the leading teams of researchers on like what an actual injury is, and they all look at it from different lenses, on like looking at it from different complex systems approaches, and there's no straight across in terms of consensus. There's no black or white, yes or no answer to this. So these claims have very absolute black or white kind of statements. So it's counter to the scientific communities and consensus and what's being still researched and tested today. There's one, like, don't want to leave listeners in the dark. There's one paper that's from 2016 that's called Complex Systems Approach for Sports Injuries. And I can link it to you guys after. But essentially, the first sentence of the abstract, and I recommend reading it. It's also free. The first sentence for this discussion: injury prediction is one of the most challenging issues in sports.
Mm.
So it's challenging.
Yeah.
And then it goes like, a lot of investigations have assumed a reductionist view. A reductionist just means like we're trying to pinpoint one singular individual cause in this chain of events. But we can't, because injuries are complex. There's so many different factors, like multiple factors all interacting together. Like we've even given an example of like a meniscal injury on a scan. For one person, they might have pain. For another person, they might not have pain. So already you can't, like, you have to consider the entire ecosystem, the entire picture, the whole picture of this. So having a claim like higher risks of injury with both inflexibility and hyperflexibility, for who?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. For
So
who? Sorry,
exactly. Right. Oh, so yeah, now looking at that, right? So this is that slide's a great context for like what that does for students, and especially me and Victor, when say we first read this, but actually we probably thought different about it because it was quite late on in the year. But I guess this really does lead to this common theory and this common understanding from students moving forward in the field of health that tightness is bad, right? So how, looking at that statement, because there's three different concepts in there that he's brought up, but that really all that does for the person reading it is bring out this concept that tightness is bad either way. So to start off, I think it's good for us to talk about and bring out our personal feelings. What do we think about that statement individually? Victor or Dan, you guys start first.
What I wanted to say just quickly before that,
Mm.
hyperflexibility, like, is that like the genetic condition where some people just have like double jointed thumbs, for example, things like that, or is it if you do the splits, is that hyperflexibility? Because, like, for example, like ballerinas, dancers, people like gymnasts, people who have hyperflexibility in that sense, I guess, compared to the normal person. Are they in a higher risk of injury, or people who are more, I guess, like inflexible, maybe genetically, like in terms of the ligaments, stuff like that, that they like yeah, I get why it was written like this, because you can't just go into every little pedantic detail, right? There needs to be some sort of compromise,
Yeah.
but I feel like, yeah, there needs to be
It's
a little bit more going on there, and especially the fact that we had to email and to get the references is a bit of a sloppy job in my opinion. But I guess that's something to look out for from now on, and maybe be a little bit more proactive coming up in the second year.
Yeah, well, the question with that is like, what is flexibility, right? Like, one's person hyperflexibility would be different to another person's, and generalizing it in this way is probably not the best, is it?
I can already see us becoming super annoying to all of our lecturers, tutors, but I feel like it will grow a lot from it, because you'll see other people's perspectives and see what they mean, and you could actually come to change your mind or learn something new. So instead of just sort of passing it on as like whatever, I accept it, actually question it and find out their beliefs. I think that's a really important takeaway from this podcast in general. We'll go through these claims, but yeah, this needs to be an ongoing process of actively seeking out knowledge.
And that's a sign of a good clinician.
Mm.
If you're questioning things.
Yeah.
We want to leave that there. I think we've given it enough time, and possibly move on to the second claim, which is tightness is bad.
Yeah. I think it leaves it, but
Tightness is bad. Okay, that's very vague, first of all. Yeah, so, okay, tightness and bad. So what does tightness mean?
So there's a couple of really good free and like easily digestible blogs, one by Greg Lehman, the other one by Todd Hargrove. And essentially tightness can be defined as a feeling or a perception of some kind of bodily discomfort, in general with relation to feelings of stiffness. And by feelings of stiffness, you can have full range of motion and be even hypermobile, but still experience tightness. So the tightness is not indicative of structural stiffness. So I think that's a starting point. And there's the more you look into tightness, it has similar biopsychosocial, like multifactorial components to it. So like you can experience tightness not moving. So if you think about it, if tightness, the assumption is, tightness is range of motion related, but you can sit down for 4 hours and feel tight, but you haven't moved. So why do you feel tight? So I think that recognizing when we're using that term can then contextualize like who's talking about it. Is it someone that's saying, okay, do this knee to wall test to improve your squat mobility, because tightness in ankles is bad. You need to improve your dorsiflexion, range of motion. Cool. So that's a specific tightness in here. Whereas if it's a client saying, hey, I've got tightness here, I've got really kind of tight trap muscles, that's a different context, and you would have a different approach according to the person and their tasks. So that's like a overview of tightness, but like, what have you guys heard?
Well, Daniel, would you separate tightness from mechanical stiffness? Is that how you sort of?
Yeah, I mean, you can feel tight without having mechanical tight, like range of motion testing in a goniometer, for instance.
Yes, that'd be stiffness,
I use my wrist as an example. If you guys have like a really inflexible joint, just use that. So my wrists can only bend there, like that much. So that's like a hard endpoint. And I often get clients to like try and push as much as possible into trying to get more wrist extension, and they feel that hard, kind of bony, hard tissue endpoint. So that's genetic, but I don't feel tight.
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference there with the range of motion and a perception or a feeling. Both are real, I think, to clarify. It's not like it's in your head if you feel tight. There's more to it than just structural range of motion.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me, because I used to think that, like, because it feels like that, right? Or maybe it's just society makes us think it's like that, but that's another conversation. But like, for example, you get like always on the computer, you got tight traps, right? It feels like it's tight, like the muscle's shortened, and that's my perception, right? And then like when I talked to you about it, and then you gave me the examples, like can a ventriloquist get tightness? Can dancers get tightness? Like, and I realized like, like all my experiences with those sort of people. There's my high school was like a dance performance school. I knew a lot of them, and people were complaining about tightness and stiffness. I'm like, oh, this kind of doesn't add up. Like, even having one loophole out of a scientific theory made me realize that there's probably a better explanation for it. So we can never get to the truth, but the idea of like finding, it's literally refuting the theory and coming out with a new conjecture and sort of improving that theory each time. So that's something that was.
Can I offer a translation?
Yes.
Because that's fucking complicated. The seatbelt analogy, I think, is useful. So if you have 3 seatbelts, one of them has not been tested, and it's in your car. That's option 1. Option 2, one has been like tested a few times, but like 30 years ago or 10 years ago, it hasn't really been rigorously reassessed at all or examined. And the third one, it's been tested like rigorously, like trying to go through a whole battery of assessments from different companies as well, and all with different evaluations. Which seatbelt would you want for your car?
I love that. Yeah, that's a great one.
So if we have a theory, it needs to be tested, ideally. When it can be tested, some things, and this is another topic, some things it's hard to find like a way to falsify or a way to test it. But we can still use scientific methods or methodologies to figure out what's the strongest, most robust explanation for this, like the most reliable seatbelt, for instance. So tightness is bad is just an overly simplistic viewpoint. And I think the thing that you touched on, Victor, before was like, it can be very normal to experience tightness. So like if you're sitting down for a long time, your body's going to tell you that it needs blood flow. It's getting uncomfortable. Like I've shifted in my seat for the past like 10 minutes because the natural movement is there. Like there's a signal, there's a perception of ischemia or of some kind of bodily discomfort, like a sensation that's real and felt in the body. So often it's just a sign of movement, or often it might be a sign of other things going on, like stress at work, like sitting down for 4 hours in front of Netflix versus sitting down at work in a job that you hate.
Yeah, you don't hear people feeling stiff or tight, or their glutes being tight or inflexible when they're watching Netflix, but at work there's a lot of about that. There's a whole field of study towards that, ergonomics, right? So that really brings in the whole psychosocial aspect to it, and like, that does validate that theory even more, that tightness is actually a feeling and a perception, much like pain. Okay, I think. Oh, sorry, you go, Henry.
No, I was just saying I'd agree with you there. It's definitely more psychosocial in terms of how people perceive it, and definitely related to pain.
Yeah, and the thing is, if it was really mechanical, then I don't know how you'd explain it. Like, would it be a muscle-based thing or a ligament-based thing? Because, like, if it was a ligament thing, like that's kind of already predetermined. I guess, yeah, but if you could change it, it would have to be a long-term adaptation, right? It's not something that can fluctuate like we tend to see with tightness. Like one day you'll get tightness, the next day you won't, or like it'll get better and then it'll come back. So if it was really a physical thing, I would find it hard to imagine how uh, tissue could change so drastically.
Well,
So,
weirdly for me, like for example, on that, like I don't know what this is. Like this could be just psychological, but say if I wake up in the morning and I stand up and I go to touch my toes or a hamstring stretch, I'll probably reach and I'll feel that sort of, I don't know, stretch through my hammies and lower back a lot more when I first initially wake up, but I won't go as far. So I'll go quite. I'll probably go a hand's length less than I would if I then repeated it sort of in the middle of the day.
true, yeah, we
So
learned.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what that is because for me personally, that's what I feel, and that's what maybe that's because I've been told that in the mornings you're going to be less flexible, and that's just how my body works. Like it just sort of adapts that way. But it, I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out more about that. And I guess it ties back to this idea with the feeling of tightness and how psychosocial it is. And yeah, anyway.
Two things that come to my mind. The psychosocial is physiological. So if you feel scared, what does your heart rate do?
Go up.
Or if you feel like anxious, what happens to your palms and like your tummy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a bidirectional. It's like it's body and mind. You can't really separate it. So like the morning stiffness is a very real I can't even get my words, physiological response, and it's particularly with like systemic conditions like osteoarthritic or arthritic kind of presentations where the joints are really stiff. You get that with like older patients, and that's normal. That's like expected as part of the aging process. I think it's not like it's in their head or anything. It's just that's sleep is when we move the least. So if movement is related to stiffness and tightness, like we mentioned, if we're sitting down for a long time, we get tight. So if movement is related to that, what do we do when we're sleeping? Not moving. So then when we get up, what's the first thing that happens? Yeah, stiff. And then it's like the first rep of any kind of resistance training exercise. Like a squat is the most salient one that I use as an example because it's so relatable when you kind of start squats, like bodyweight squats, that sucks. Or under the bar, it's like the first set is horrible. And then after doing a few reps, like your warm-up sets, how does it feel over time?
Better.
Yeah,
so that
better.
Physiological response, it's not like you psychosocially like reduce your tightness just by warming up. It's just your body needed that like a blood flow, essentially warming up. So I think this might tie into the activation drills later. That kind of
definitely. I was about to say that.
But I think as a simple practical heuristic shortcut, it's like movement. Movement helps.
Yeah.
And maybe normalizing a lot of these things like tightness. Stop like over medicalizing it. That'd be nice. I wouldn't want my mum and dad to think that, oh shit, I've got tight traps. I better see a massage therapist every week just to release my tight traps. It's like, fuck, that's a lot of waste, cost.
Yeah.
Gets people away from life. Not that there's anything wrong with the massage as well. Like stretching and massages are amazing. But I think the way that the reasons that we give for it are often wrong.
As in, how do you mean, Daniel? Like, what reasons would you now say are better for sort of massage and stretching?
I would ask the person, how does it feel? And if they say it feels good, I say, awesome. Does it get in the way of your life? And if they say yes, I go, okay, what can we do to make you feel good? What other things make you feel good? If they say, no, it doesn't get in the way of my life, I love it. I love my massage therapist. We get along. It's not too much of a cost for me. I'd be like, cool, keep it up. So what are your goals? How can I help?
Yeah.
Okay. I heard I think it was a podcast with Adam Meekins. I forgot which one, but yeah, he said something about that. But then he used like motivational interviewing techniques and be like, oh yeah, how's it going? Are you enjoying the massage, etc.? And then like, yeah, you're going every week. How much does that cost you? Yeah, well, like how's your situation going? And then eventually like they found out that it was was actually pretty hard for that person to like support that sort of thing financially. So like that's just an example of where like massage could like it's not the best long-term solution, especially when you're in that cycle of short-term relief. Yeah, it's just reminded me of that situation.
So that's with the function of pain relief. What I assumed is just massage. Nothing's wrong with massage, like massage. It's like what's it for? If it's for fixing or reducing pain, then that's a different story. That's like a different kind of context. Like if someone comes into you and they're like with persisting pain and tightness and stiffness, and they're like doing all these activation exercises and warm-up drills, and they get a massage every week, and they do all this foam rolling, and they have like a 30-minute warm-up routine, different context than like just someone that's like, hey, is massage good?
So,
Like, yeah, it's good.
So here's an idea. Basically, we get a patient with tightness. You can do no interventions and just create a calming, welcoming environment, listen to them, be empathetic, and then their pain, not their pain, their tightness could actually improve within that session. Does that sound like a plausible thing?
Well, if you know what their tightness specifically, like their lived experience, n equals 1 tightness, could be, maybe, possibly. I feel less tight as I'm talking, even though I haven't moved much. I was tight 5 minutes ago, but I've been talking and I'm engaging with you guys. I'm like looking at the amazing backgrounds and wishing I had a very nice, attractive background behind me to signify Christmas, but I don't. But so so things, there's a complex interaction of things like attention or what the meaning of my stiffness is. I know that I'm safe and there's no threat to my being or my identity, or like if I get stiff now, I know that if I move, it will get better. So I have confidence right now. Whereas some people, they don't have confidence because they've been told that they're broken, or they've been told essentially that they need treatments to fix up their tightness.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. I'd add to it by just saying, like an example for myself, like now looking back on it in hindsight, like those times when I've been going to like say games or something on the weekend, there's that added stress, right? There's that sort of anxiety attached with the whole, playing the game and the whole match. That going to it, yes, you would feel like in the locker rooms beforehand and stuff like that. I would feel more sort of like everyone rolls out and stretches before the game. You can see the whole team doing it. Like everyone feels, and even myself, I would say like I'd feel more sort of tight in my head before the game, like prior to it. And that, really does expose to me that idea that, that maybe there is really that sort of tightness is attached to that psycho side more than the mechanical stiffness.
Yeah, it's not like your body changed in 30 minutes before before or after the game or whatever. But yeah, that feeling of the jitters and the nerves is like normal and human. And if like athletes do a routine of rolling out and stretching, it's fine if it doesn't affect their performance negatively. Perfect. Yeah. But yeah, it's less about structural. Your body is tight. Yeah. I think that's the narrative that's probably less helpful.
I feel like that's a really good example of like contextual factors possibly confounding with what we think is working. Because say, for example, a group of like a soccer team goes to foam roll, whatever, and stretch before the game. That's sort of like there's a social aspect there, and people like talking, having a chat before the game, getting hyped up. So it could be plausible that it's not the foam rolling, it's not the stretching, but rather the like sense of community and like the mental framing could be contributing to that, maybe the relief of tightness and pain and things like that. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, that we see these things all the time, but there's actually more contextual factors.
And I'm just going to be annoying and relate that to the body. Sorry to interrupt. Like, how does the social, like how does your body feel when you're around your best mates versus how does your body feel when you're standing in front of a crowd of like 100 people? The same social, but the body changes. Like you get stiffer, or like you get more self-conscious, you get a bit worried, am I going to make the wrong kind of mistake in this speech or something? And your kind of thoughts running through your mind, and your heart rate changes. So it's physiological sweating changes with the social element. So it's like it's multi-directional is the process.
And like when you're in a job interview, you're like stiff, upright, like sweating. It's really a fight or flight response, really. And yeah, it's quite interesting to think
Yeah,
about it
so
that way.
we can look back at the questions and the claims and look at what are the biopsychosocial influences and how does the social influence the bio and the psycho influence the bio, and it's all one. Like you can't separate. I think with uni we want to separate, and it goes back to the point of it being reductionist, of like this is the one cause. If you are inflexible, it's bad.
And yeah, I feel like the graph, the three circle Venn diagram doesn't do it justice. Because when I saw in the knowledge exchange course, the blob, the purple blob, that like had the fact that it's fluid. It's like imagine a purple blob that's like floating and always changing, and it's like a jellyfish. That I feel like that's a way better representation of BPS.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's how I like to imagine. I don't think the Venn diagram does much justice. But anyway,
So yeah, so looking at that claim, just going back to, so now we've sort of discussed that definition. The claim tightness is bad, right? If you use tightness in the definition we've just thought of, right? Or not the definition we thought of it, like as in the definition we've sort of come to, as it being more psychologically related and how it affects mechanical stiffness. Would you say tightness, psychological tightness, is bad?
The go-to kind of, hang on, sorry, I'm going to decline that call. The go-to kind of answer is, what's the context? So tightness bad for a soccer player, and the function of the tightness is like jitters and nervousness. Does that give them energy for the game? Does that like prepare them? Does that improve their focus for the game? So to that, it's like it's not necessarily bad, unless the person says it's bad. Then that's a different conversation. The tightness, if you're sitting down for a long time, maybe the tightness, what does the tightness mean for that person in that context? Maybe the tightness means that there's a lot going on for them. There's a lot of stress, and they've probably got some thoughts about they need to make sure that they're in the right position, in the right ergonomic chair. They've on their news feeds and Google ads, everyone's like recommending a like back specific injury prevention $1,000 chair. So they're thinking about that. They've got like never ending to-do lists. They've got kids at home. Okay, that's a different context for the tightness. So tightness absolutely is bad if they say it's bad. The tightness in that context is there's multiple different factors contributing.
To me, there's when people say those sorts of claims like bad, it always comes back to pain. So to me, it really, I think a lot of people use like in that claims tightness is bad in the fact that it can induce pain, because otherwise, yeah, I feel like pain is a really big thing that's thought to be negative, and you should be avoiding it. So I feel like that to me is what really, this is how I'm perceiving that claim. And is it bad? It's bad, but it depends on the framing, because it could be bad if it's debilitating. But then it could be, if it's like a minor niggle or something, and you're paying like you're not putting too much attention to it. It's just your body telling you to do something, or it could be a call to action. So even then, there's a lot of nuance. So I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, and I feel like a better claim would be tightness is bad for XYZ. That's just for that further clarification, because bad is very vague.
I would agree with that. And like, if you look at it for an example, in terms of like, you go to the gym, you hit legs really hard, and then the next day or the day after DOMS, you get really sore legs, and you feel that like you got to bend over and you can't go that far. It's really painful. And that's even like, that's in a lot of people, that's like a positive feeling, because it's like, oh, I've worked out really hard. I feel tight. I can't bend over as much. I'm really sore, right? So I guess that could be an idea of it being positive in the person's mind, but yeah.
Yeah, and if we have a definition of range of motion, my wrists are shit for handstands. Like I can still adapt to it, but it's probably not the best if I want to be a world-class gymnast or some other functional task activity requiring that range of motion. I might not be suited. Like structurally, there are limitations, if that's what they mean by tightness, for instance. So yeah,
that's good, really good.
I think if we're all happy, we can move on to the third and final claim, which is, can you bring that up, Henry? I think it was activation.
There's stability and there's activation.
Oh, okay. Yes. Sorry. We'll do a two in one then. Stability
Yeah.
causes pain,
Just,
I think it was, and then
do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, yes, please.
You need to be stable to be out of pain.
Like financially stable. Like what kind of what stability? Like quickfire with the stability. Even then, there's a lot of vague definitions. It's like, so essentially, if you have a system, there's a boundary line with that system. So what I mean is like single leg static balance. If you are stable, you are keeping within that single leg stance. If you're unstable, that means that you lose balance or you fall. So a stable system would be keeping that single leg stance. But then you can go, okay, well, if I step out to the side and widen my base of support and then come back to that middle point, is that still stable? So with the definition, it can be fluid. It's very vague. It's like overly used in a lot of kind of stability exercises. By stability, what people generally mean is isometric, or holding a position is generally how I've seen it. Or like fine motor, small kind of isolated movements is what they mean by stability. It just sounds like a fancy scientific sounding name.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the
there's
definition.
there's both static and dynamic. You could say, like, people would say, if you're stable on what's a moving example? I don't know.
You can go sprinting.
Yeah.
Like if you're sprinting and you don't fall over, that's pretty stable to me.
Yeah. So, I think that's, in terms of definition. Anyone, Vic, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, for me, like in my experience, stability has been like, I guess we'll take the example of a squat where it's like not being in a smooth, perfect alignment and like consistent speed, I guess, because you can imagine a squat, like a perfect squat, just going down and up, and like the knees are just perfect, right? That's what I would have considered stability, and in my experience, that's what I would have thought was like a building, right? A building just stays still, or it's like there's like straight lines. It's same with the body, like it has to be moving in a straight position. If I'm doing overhead press, it needs to be like this, like not wobbling or anything like that. So I feel like things like wobbling are a sign of instability. That's just my definition, but like
that links to like proprioceptive stability, of like ability to be consistent in like one plane, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I think that'd be a good definition. Yeah. Being smooth motion in one plane.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, let's say you have shoulder pain and then you're like really unstable with the overhead press, and then you prescribe overhead presses, right? And then let's say the pain gets better. You don't know if it was the stability, or was it the fact that they just got stronger, or like I don't know if you could break it down, possibly, yeah. Or it could even not be that at all.
So to clarify, from my understanding, if a movement is wobbly, that means it's unstable.
Yes, that's
What if
why.
it's just too heavy for them?
Then it's unstable because they
Is
put
it unstable, or is it just too much? So my mind just goes to, what's the RPE?
Well, they become unstable when there's too much weight. Could you say that?
Are they just not strong enough for that task? Like I'm thinking powerlifting, right? Like if you want to talk example, powerlifting squat. When you look at the top powerlifters in the world, when they're doing really heavy squats, are they unstable in their 1RM, like the world record kind of squats?
No.
Yeah, what would you say to that? That's tough because when you see that and you see like professionals doing it, you're like, oh, they must know what they're doing and they're really stable. But they're actually not, because you see those classic signs of like knee valgus, whatever, and yeah, not good form. Well, it's kind of expected when you're going that heavy. Yeah, that's really weird.
Olympic lifting is probably a better example as well for that, like the valgus twitch, and you see a lot of the catches are like really shaky, but they're still stable. Like they did the lift, still counts. 4 white lights, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an interesting idea because I guess it's each person, a stability for someone, if you talk about it like that, changes depending on the person's context, definitely, in terms of how much they can lift, what they lift, and their sort of experience lifting, I guess, if you're doing a movement like that. And yeah, if you look at it in a different sense in terms of the weight, instead of it being just about their stability, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
It could be motor control. It could just be practice. I
Yeah.
think what I struggle with is putting it down to one thing, especially one thing that we haven't even defined, or that like isn't really defined. Is it shakiness? That's like, what do you do with neurological patients then?
Yeah.
And they're on
Yeah.
the leg press and they're shaking. What are you going to do? Prescribe a stability exercise? No, if they can do their leg press and it's meaningful for them and it improves their function, it's just a strength exercise. It just looks different.
Yeah, people with neurological conditions, why aren't they in pain all the time?
Yeah. So my question then is, when do you see stability exercises?
When
Like, how are they used on the socials, Instagram, rehab gurus, or
well,
even from your own experience, from what you've seen, heard?
I would say I'll use Squat Universe as an example. Um, you do see so classic video starts off with the testing, finds an imbalance, and then the stability, like for example, core stability, he'll do like bird dogs or something like that. Um, I don't know the rationale to be honest. Um, but I guess it just makes sense. Like, yeah, you need your core to be stable to be able to lift more efficiently, and like if you're outside of that perfect alignment, you could put more stress on the tissue. I think that's where that's coming from. I don't know exactly the rationale behind it though.
I think the rationale, the common rationale for people with this idea of it, of stability, in what you just said, Victor, is I think people believe, and it's a common belief, that when they don't have the core stability or the uniform, plane of movement, that then there is high, like they're scared and there's high possibility of injury. That's the mindset, right? Because if the general idea that a lot of people think is like, oh, if I'm on a like if I'm walking along and I have like all wobbly legs and stuff, I'm gonna roll my ankle or do this or do that, right? There's and it comes like to elderly people, then they have sort of, they're scared, like it's hard for them. They often have falls because for them their feelings of like how stable they are or how their perception of stability is a lot different and a lot worse.
That's actually a really good point. Like
Yeah.
all of our like the general population's experience with stability and instability is like those maybe elderly populations or things like that where you link it to injury and fragility and things like that. That's actually a very good point. I never thought about that.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
that's Daniel. What do you think?
Yeah. Just my mind was going to force training. What do you do with force training? Do you get people to walk perfectly aligned?
No.
What do you do?
No.
But like I don't know exactly what they do, but do they like learn how to fall properly and catch themselves?
Yeah. And you do single leg stance or like tandem stance, like you
Yeah.
challenge that. You do perturbations. You can distract them cognitively. So there's dual tasking. They're like trying to do a tandem walk, like one foot in front of the other, like they're on a tightrope. So you challenge that stability. So if we're using that kind of line of thinking or logic into a barbell squat, it's like, oh, so if that's the case, then why isn't Scott University doing like, I don't know, shouting at people and getting them distracted and pushing them out of the way as they're doing heavy squats? Because that's what you do with older people for force training.
Yeah. Or is it not stability? Is it more about inability to balance properly in compromised positions? I don't know.
So hopefully this helps like shed some doubt on the very certain, confident kind of claims that we see about stability.
Yeah.
What do people mean by stability? Depends.
I think we need to ask people more often, like next time you hear a claim, just ask. Like same with uni, same with other clinicians, just yeah, when you hear those terms, just ask what they mean, because we're over here struggling to define certain things because we all have different ideas, and each definition could have different implications, even though we might be thinking the same. So I think the big takeaway here is ontology. That's what I'm getting at, and how different definitions can really change the way we treat and the way we see the world, and we should question that more often.
We need specificity. Like we need them to like be more like.
It's on the person who makes the claim to tell you. It's not. It shouldn't be up to us to sort of be in a maze trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So looking at that claim, which is, do you need to be cell to be out of pain? That's another whole level, right? That's pain, going into whole pain side of things. Like that's just such a broad statement. Like there's so much to it. Like to be able to break that down, that's going to take a long time, right?
Well, like, but then you can use your filters again and just like,
yeah,
okay, X causes pain. You can already filter that out because we know pain is multifactorial and it's reductionistic to just put on one thing, right? So like those sort of filters, like with the previous example, you can just filter it out. But yeah, I think filters.
Yeah, like, how would it change it if what would it be like if it was, instead of pain, it was injury? Like how would that change it, you reckon?
So if we had to change the claim,
yeah,
I would say, well, I don't even know what stability is, so I don't know what but even then you could you wouldn't say it causes pain. You would say not even could lead to, but like is part of a dynamic system of many other factors which could lead to pain or other bodily sensations, like something like that, right? Acknowledge the fact that it's more complicated than a linear A to Z sort of progression.
Yeah. Okay.
Does this change your mind on like all the common rehab posts you see?
Yeah, it changes completely.
I think a lot of people. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go.
Yeah, I think now when I see those, I'm just like, what do you mean? But I might just comment that, what do you mean by stability? Tell me what it is, and then maybe I have a better idea.
Yeah.
So if a clinician is really confident and certain, what does that mean?
It's a bit of a red flag to me because.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, because the fact it's a bit of a Dunning-Kruger effect, right? If you're certain of something, you just, it's not that you don't know what you don't know. It's you know that you just are perfect and you don't get anything wrong. And I don't think anyone's done that yet. And science is always evolving, so what might be relevant now is not relevant next year or the year after that. Yeah. But then that gets into sort of character, like yeah.
And unfortunately, they're often the most popular because we want certainty. So we look at someone who's very confident with a claim.